I'm Bruce Bradway. I'm your new instructor. I've been here for a while. I've been at Dene College for 8 years now. The reason I say that your new instructor is because you may have signed up for this class with Dr. Russ, but Dr. Russ, we need her to work on the substance abuse counseling certificate. And so I am taking one of her classes, and this is the class, Psych 250, Social Psychology. So let me go through I'll try not to make this too difficult. Let me go through the syllabus. This is me, and this is where I am right now. It looks like I'll be here until they decide to bring us back. They may be bringing us back sometime maybe next year. It looks like the spring we will still be remote. We're trying to make the psychology program a distance education program, which means that it's both. You can either take classes as hybrids or face to face or online. This is me, and this is my telephone number. That's my cell phone number. I have office hours every day, Monday through Thursday. Monday and Tuesday, it's in the afternoon, 3 to 5, your time. And on Wednesdays and Thursdays, it's in the morning, 8 to 10. If you need to talk to me and you can't make my office hours, there's no problem. Just email me and I will turn the Zoom on. This is my fairly permanent Zoom number. I've been using it for a couple of years now. So there you go. Anytime you need to contact me and you would like to see me face to face or see what I look like, my goodness, that's kind of scary. But you can Zoom. We can Zoom together. If you need to talk about anything, that's fine too. I'm always here to help any way that I possibly can. This is going to be an interesting semester because I found out that Dr. Russ is using a different text than I do. This is a text that I inherited when I got here. Aronson, Wilson, Ackert, and Summers. There's probably a newer edition than this. If you have this textbook, that's fine. Don't worry about it. You've got the textbook that we will be using, but there's also a textbook that Dr. Russ is using that I would like to try out. So I'm going to use it as well. I'm going to at least look at it. Some of the chapters are not the same, but we'll figure that out as we go along. It's social psychology written by Gilovich and a group of other authors. The Gilovich is the main author. So if you have Aronson or Gilovich, you're in good shape. We should be okay. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, we have 15 weeks, don't we? Yeah, we have 15 weeks to fill up information. So we're going to take a couple of weeks off or not deal with anything over select time period. Between chapter 6 and 7, we'll take a little break, and between 9 and 10, we'll take a little break, and that's it, I think. Yeah, there's only 13 chapters in the book, so there's 14 chapters in Gilovich. So maybe I'll add a chapter, and if we do, we'll just stick it in week 11 or week 7. And there's the schedule. So the question you probably are going to ask is, how in the world are we going to pass? How do you pass this class? And this is how we do it. This is how we, oh, that's an old song. There's 13 chapters, and there's a chapter quiz after each test. The chapter quizzes, you can think of them as a quiz. You can think of them as review. I like to think of them as review because I don't really care how much you look these things up, whether you look up the information or not. When you're confronted with a piece of information, if you look at the information more than once, twice or three times, that information tends to stick in your mind. tends to go into long-term memory, and that's why I'm giving you these quizzes. There are certain concepts of social psychology that I want you to remember, and those concepts are represented in the chapter tests, the chapter quizzes. Each chapter quiz is a multiple choice question. It's not, you don't have to fill in the blanks or whatever. So the answer's right there, and a lot of research has been done trying to determine what is the best way for people to learn. And what they've determined is the multiple choice questions are better than fill in the blank. How about that? Who would have thought that? We've been arguing about this. I've been in education for, golly, how long have I been in education? About 45 years. And this has been a long-standing argument. Multiple choice questions don't make you think. Well, yes, they do, because you have to pick out the right answer from 3 wrong answers. And that's always a bit of a trick. Okay, so there's, and I'm going to give you points for the quizzes, and don't expect you to. I don't expect you to get hundreds on all the quizzes, but they pretty much follow the PowerPoint presentations. Okay, so that's 195 points. There's a library paper that you need to do on some concept of social psychology, and that's worth 100 points. Discussion questions. This is how I get to force you to think. That is my main mission in life, is to make people think rather than make people remember. Memory is one thing, but thinking is something totally different. Thinking makes you intelligent. Remembering just is something that's already in your brain. So if you can problem solve, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to problem solve. The reality is that our future is uncertain. It's always uncertain. It really doesn't matter what era we're talking about, but your future is always uncertain, and things are continually evolving and progressing. And in order for you to live in this progressive, evolving world, you need to be able to think, and you need to be able to plan. You can't look backwards and figure out what's going to happen in the future. That doesn't work that way. You need to know you need to be able to think, and you need to be able to project, and you need to be able to solve problems. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to be able to solve problems. Now, we're talking about psychology here. So will things change in the future? Will psychology change in the future? Well, I can tell you, I've been studying psychology since 1976. And psychology has changed markedly since I started working with psychology. So what I want you to do is be the innovative thinker that understands that just because things worked one way in the past, you think that they're going to work that way for the rest of your life. This is one of the problems with education anyway. Education teaches you what's happening right now, but it can't project what's going to happen in the future. And a lot of times things change. Now, physics doesn't change a whole lot. Chemistry doesn't change a whole lot. All the chemicals you put together, you'll still come out with the same product. But psychology has to do with humans, and humans think differently from one moment to the next. An example would be if you read Left-Handed Son of Old Man Hat, the way that he thought, and the way that people think on the Navajo Nation now, completely different, very, very, very different, because their mindset was different. Because his only transportation was by horse. Everything was very, very much different, and it's going to be different in the future. And of course, now they're talking about, not only are they talking about global warming, but the weather is changing. And I think you guys had the hottest summer on record in Arizona. And so did we up here in Iowa. So things may be getting hotter, and the ice caps are melting, and Florida might go underwater someday. New York City will be flooded. All of these things will be changes that are happening in the future. Trump could be elected president again, and he might decide that he's going to imprison all the Democrats or something. You just never know what's going to happen. Okay, so there you go. That's one of the reasons why I'm asking you these questions. I'm trying to get you to think. I'm trying to get you to problem solve. I want you to understand your past so that your past doesn't bother you in the future. The more we think about it, see what happened to you when you were a child, what happened to you when you're an adolescent, your brain wasn't completely mature yet. So what happened to you and your memory of it is the memory of a child or the memory of an adolescent. But if we look at it from an adult perspective, sometimes it changes the things that happen to you. And that's psychology. That's the way it works. So that's why I ask you some of the questions that I ask you. Okay? I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help you become the person that you potentially can be in the future. Okay, so that's another 130 points. There's one question for each chapter. The other thing that I want you to do, and this is something that I've something I think is very important. I want you to participate in research. Now, when I say I want you to participate in research, I'll show you the website I'm talking about in just a second. But if you participate in research and you only have to do 10 of them in a 15-week period, that's worth 100 points. And they're gimme points. And when I say they're gimme points, what I mean is as long as you do the research, doesn't really matter how much research, it doesn't matter what happened in the research, whether it took 2 minutes or it took 20 minutes, really doesn't matter. I just want you to participate in research. And the reason is because psychology is based on research. The only reason that we know what's happening right now is because people have done research and they've written books they've written articles and then they put that research in books. And that's the way that we know how people are reacting now. I have somewhere I have my first abnormal psychology text. If you read it today, you wouldn't recognize anything that's in there. They talk about hysteria. They talk about different types of schizophrenia that don't exist anymore. Things change, and the only reason that we know that they change, the only reason that we're not stuck in the mindset of Sigmund Freud from the 1890s is because we've done research and we know that people aren't the same as they were in 1890, and they're not the same as they were in 1950. I was born in 1949, so I lived throughout the 50s and the 60s, and I can tell you that people aren't the same as they were. For one thing, they're looking at their cell phones all the time. Well, cell phones weren't invented until the 1990s. And those were huge. You couldn't do anything on them. They weren't computers like they are now. There was no satellite service. Well, there was for the military, but there wasn't for anybody else. We were connected to walls. Computers were the size of tables. And you couldn't do anything with them. They weren't personal computers. They were research computers. That was all we had in the 1950s and 1960s. I can remember the first computer I ever saw was at my undergraduate school, Wabash College. They had a computer in the basement. And literally it was the size of a desk. And it didn't have a screen. All you could do was type numbers. And you had to program it every time you wanted to ask it a question. Anyway, okay. So I want you to do research, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in just a second. Anyway, so that's cumulatively, it's 525 points. Can you not write the paper and still pass the class? Well, that's minus 100 points of 520. That would be 425. That would be a B if you aced everything else. So there you go. So you need to do everything. discussion questions, quizzes, and the research. That's your weekly assignments. And then you have the your paper. Okay? All right. And your quizzes are worth about twice as many points. Okay, your library paper. It has to be 5-page, at least a 5-page paper. You need 5 references. Okay, so when I say 5 pages, I'm talking about 5 pages of text. I'm not talking about your reference page, doesn't count. I'm not talking about your title page, doesn't count. I'm talking about 5 pages of text. And I do count lines, as you can see right here. I count lines, which means you need 23 lines per page. You don't have to have 23 lines per page. You can have 20 lines per page, but that will mean that you'll be writing 5.5 pages. I count lines. That's a warning and a hint. Everything's due the beginning of November. You can turn in, if you want me to look at your paper before to edit it or whatever, you need to have it in by the 15th of October. Okay, and here's the format that I want you to use. You can turn it in PDF, but I'll have to convert it because I can't grade. I can't edit and I'm an old English teacher. My first degree is in English. So I'm an old English teacher. I will deep read your paper and I will correct your grammar. Okay, what else? And this is all has to do with APA. And if you want to see about APA, look at the assignments page. And Professor Barber, who is soon to be Dr. Barber, has put together a PowerPoint that explains APA. We're in the 7th edition. And there's the rubric I use. Research participation. Okay, here it is. This is the website that you need to go to. So if we click on this, this is where we go. And as you can see, there's lots of different research from all over the place. If you want to do interpersonal relations, there's all of those. There's one about COVID. Social perception, belief, attitude. These are all research. This is research being done by people around the world, as it turns out. There's Walden University. That is the college where I received my PhD. Some of these are from Australia, some from Canada, some from England, mostly the United States. Here's one from Netherlands. Here's one from India. Anything that you want to do research on. Oh, this is professional research. This is the top part, and the bottom part is student research. So if you want to help a student out, all the same things. And you can see there's just tons and tons of research. And this is on the Social Psychology website, Social Psychology Network. Okay? So I want you to do research. I want you to help these people do their research. And it's not going to take very long usually it doesn't take very long, 4 or 5 minutes to get through this. Sex trafficking awareness. Oops, there's Wally. Let's go back to this. There we go. Okay, so there you go. That's the website right there. There's your due dates. Okay, here's the deal. Just between you and I don't count off for late work, and there's a lot of reasons why I don't do it. Gets me in trouble at the end of every semester. That's okay. I'll fight off the provost and my dean, but I don't count off for late work. If you want to wait until the end of the semester to do everything, you can go ahead and do that. I do get a little grouchy at the end of the semester. So if you're going to turn in a paper the day before I have to turn in grades, you can go ahead and do it. But I'm probably going to be a little stiff with the grading. Anyway, this is when all the article or the postings are due. do I stick by this schedule? No, this is just a suggestion. I understand everybody else is trying to teach you time management, and I think that's great. Everybody needs to be able to manage their time so that they can get everything done. I think that's just wonderful. I'm just not the guy that's going to do it for you. I'm not going to help you manage your time. Okay, we'll go back to Wally in just a second. Okay, and plagiarism, you gotta, what do you have to do? I'm trying to make you think, and so if you use somebody else's words, you need to tell me, hey, Johnson said this, okay? Not me. I'm not the one that came up with this brilliant idea. And the other thing is artificial intelligence, or ChatGPT. Everybody's using ChatGPT now. It really helps your grammar, and I think it's great. As an English teacher, it's really nice to be able to read your paper, but it is cheating when you do that. There's a reason why you need to write, and there's a reason why making mistakes in grammar is good. It's good because it teaches you that this isn't right, okay? And if you rely on ChatGPT to get things done, then you're never going to learn how to write yourself. So you're going to be, it's going to look like you're this brilliant person, which is cheating, which is a lie, because you didn't do any of it. And then when it's going to come time for you to, do a note to a professor, you're not going to be able to do it. You're just not going to be able to write. So don't do it. Don't use ChatGPT. It's cheating. Will I catch you? Potentially I won't, but it will make me very upset if I find out that you've done it. And there's a reason why I've got the Fitless Humans video up. That's because I consider ChatGPT leading to this type of behavior. So let me go ahead and let's watch Wally. Maybe. There we go.
They haven't all morning, so let's hover over to the driving range and hit a few virtual balls in space.
No, we did that yesterday. I don't want to do that.
Well, then what do you want to do?
I don't know. Something.
Wow.
Make a play scream.
No, it doesn't sound
Look, I'm tired of
So we'll take next week.
If you can't fold the straws, the episode isn't any good.
Hot. Over here.
Whoa.
Hello? Tunnel. I'm in a tunnel. I can't hear you.
There you are.
By and large, everything you need to be happy. Your day is very important to us.
Hey, drink the bun. Here, take the cup. Hey, take the cup.
Please remain stationary. A service bot will be here to assist you momentarily.
Stewards? No.
Please remain stationary. A service bot will be here to assist you momentarily.
What's that? What's going on? John? No. John. Hi, Wally.
A is for Axiom, your home sweet home. B is for by and large, your very best friend.
Time for lunch. In a cup. Feel beautiful.
I'm starting great. I know, honey. Men.
Attention, Axiom shoppers. Try blue. It's the new red.
Ooh.
Dates? Oh, don't get me started on the date. Every holiday I have been on has been a virtual disaster. If I
wasn't so superficial, you know. There are good men out there. Well, I know. Well, I know because I've had a bit of... What the... Huh? Mary? Huh? Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead. I didn't know we had a pool.
Okay, yeah, Fitless Humans, there we go. That's where we're headed. Every time people ask me how old I am, I'm 73, I'll be 74 in October. And they go, oh, gee, when I'm 73, I'm not going to be doing what you're doing. Well, okay, I live twice a week and I walk every day. You know, I'm physically fit. And a lot of people, they think, well, when I retire, I can stop. And the answer is, no, you look like that. You look like the Fitless Humans. And I see this every day. I'll go into Walmart or someplace, and by golly, there's some huge people. And I'm just wondering, get off your tail, bud. Do something. Why are you so lazy? Okay. Anyway, so that's how you pass the class. Please don't use ChatGPT. If you do use ChatGPT, then you need to tell me that you did, so that I'm not going to, I won't, I'll give you a 0 for grammar, okay? I'll take 20 points off. So I'd rather you didn't use it. But if you do use it, and you don't tell me you used it, then that's plagiarism, because you didn't tell me what you did. Okay. So go and do it. Some professors are going to let you do it. They want you to, you know, they think it helps your grammar. I'm sorry, I'm an English teacher. I don't buy it. You can argue with me all you like if you. It's like exercising. Saying you walk 2 miles isn't the same thing. I walk 3 miles every morning. A little bit over 3 miles. Anyway, here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. We can argue about that kind of stuff later. Chapter 1, Introduction to Social Psychology. This is the Aronson text. Actually, every time I get a new social psychology textbook, I incorporate any of the new information into my lectures. I don't take out. Sometimes I take out old information, but not all the time. Anyway, okay. Let me tell you a quick story. Once upon a time, there was a young lady who was treated very badly by her evil stepmother. She wasn't allowed to wear makeup or go to any of the local parties. One day after she was once again disappointed about a ball, her fairy godmother came to her and dolled her up for the party. And that's what she looked like. That's what she looked like before. That's what she looked like afterwards. She went to the ball and no one in her family recognized her because that's what they thought she looked like. And that's what she looked like. The prince saw her and fell immediately in love with her. But she had to leave the party early, before all the magic wore off, her hair, her makeup, her clothes, and her transportation. But she left behind a glass slipper that the prince found. Now, you probably have heard this story before, but you haven't seen pictures of her. That's what she looked like before, and that's what she looked like afterwards. The prince went around the land looking for someone to fit the slipper. He found 3 women who had the same size foot, but he didn't recognize any of them as the woman he danced with at the ball. When he found the young lady in her house, she cowered and seemed meek. Certainly not the self-assured woman from the ball. Which woman did he choose for his bride? Door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3? Just before he was about to choose one of the dark-haired women, the young lady's fairy godmother performed a miracle, and she turned into the woman the prince had fallen in love with at the ball. Not only did she look like a dreamboat, but she began walking and talking with more self-assurance. The prince immediately chose her for his princess. However, the fairy godmother was a bit of a trickster, and just as the prince was saying his final I do's, the fairy godmother changed the young lady back into what she looked like before the miraculous transformation. The fairy godmother then cussed the prince out for being so superficial and not recognizing her from her inner beauty instead of her outward appearance. The prince replied that he would have seen through her appearance if she had acted the same way she had at the ball. And this is social psychology. We act the way that we feel. We act the way that we look. And if we look different, we act different. So both the fairy godmother, who punished the prince for not recognizing her inner beauty, and the prince, who made the excuse that she didn't seem to be the same person, were right. They were both correct. Jean-Paul Sartre was a French philosopher who stated that we cannot be distinguished from our situations, for they form us and decide our possibilities. The things that I have done in my life, the places that I have been in my life, the fact that I worked on the Fort Belknap Reservation, the fact that I lived in Mississippi, that I've been to Washington, D.C., that I served in the military for 12 years, that I lived in Germany for 3 years, that I lived in Japan for 6 months. All of these things create who I am. The fact that I was born and raised in Indiana on a farm in Indiana. I'm a Hoosier. There's no way you can get that Hoosierosity out of my system, because that's who I am. We are what we have done and who we have been in the past. Herman Melville stated that our lives are connected by 1,000 invisible threads. It is these invisible threads that social psychology tries to illuminate, and that's who you are. You are what you have been. Everything has led up to who you are today. Everything that has happened to you in your past creates who you are today. And if you take one thing out, then you aren't the same person. And perhaps you don't see the world the same way. But because you have had experiences, because you've lived in Phoenix, or you've been to Flagstaff, or you visited Los Angeles, you went to Disneyland, and people treated you funny, because of all those situations, any of those situations, they have created the person that you are. Fiorina and Todd have been happily married for 3 years. Last Thursday, Fiorina got a really mean tone in her voice and shrewishly said to Todd, "Can't you ever put the cap back on the toothpaste?" Todd assumed that Fiorina must have had a bad drive home from work. The problem was external. It isn't the fact that she's always shrewish, that she always yells at Todd. It's the fact that she had a bad experience. Fitch and Bodie fought before they were married and have been unhappily sparring through the 3 years of marriage. One day, Fitch said to Bodie, "Can't you ever put the top back on the toothpaste?" Bodie thought to himself as he put the top back on the toothpaste, "What's the word for someone who is unpleasant and always hostile? Oh yeah, Fitch." Later at dinner, Fitch asked Bodie if the dinner was okay, and he blew up, anticipating a fight. He assumed it was, well, he knew it was internal, because Fitch and Bodie have been fighting all their lives. Fiorina and Todd assumed it was external. Something bad had happened. Social psychology is a scientific study of how people think about, influence, and relate to one another. Social psychology studies how we as individuals are influenced by others. Social psychology was defined by Gordon Allport, and this is Gordon Allport right here. His brother, is also a huge part of social psychology, and we'll talk about his brother in just a minute. Thoughts are affected by the actual presence of others. Feelings are affected by imagined presences of others. Behavior is affected by the implied presence of others. So it's the idea that we are a gregarious people, that we are always around somebody else, that somebody else will acknowledge what's happening to us, that somebody else would be very disappointed if we do something bad. Gee, I don't think, I sure would like to punch this guy right in the face, but then my dad would get mad if he had to come and bail me out of jail. And because of that, I'm not going to punch the guy in the face. That's somebody who is, their implied presence has changed the way that we're going to behave. That's Gordon Allport. What is the difference between social psychology and sociology? Massive question. Both fields are interested in social behavior. Psychology focuses on the individual level variables, the thought processes, the emotional reactions, the behavioral tendencies of the individual. Sociology focuses on the group level variables, the status, the norms, the social roles, and it could be of the individual, but it looks at it from a social point of view. In psychology, the individual is what we're looking at, and the thought processes, the emotions, the reactions, the behavioral tendencies, these are what we are focusing on. And society is an external variable that we're looking at. As far as sociology is concerned, they're looking at society. They may be looking at the individual, but they're looking at the individual from a social point of view. Sometimes what everyone knows is pretty accurate, and sometimes it's not. You really can't tell the difference relying on common sense. Only on common sense. Social psychology uses science to find the most reliable rules about human thought, emotion, and behavior. The thing about social psychology is that it's changing constantly. As society changes, so changes social psychology. The social psychology that I learned in the 1970s ain't the same as the social psychology of today. Today we have cell phones. Today we have computers. Today we have social media. None of that had existed back then. In order to contact somebody, you had to call them on the telephone. That's fine, but then you had to find a telephone because telephones were only connected by wires. So it had to be some place where there was a wire to connect to the telephone. They had public telephones. You had a telephone in your house. If you were out in the middle of the desert, you couldn't call anybody. You were SOL, as it were. Things have changed. The world has changed. Wilhelm Wundt argued for the development of social psychology back in 1862. Wundt had the first psychological laboratory in Leipzig, Germany. And one of the things that Wundt saw was that if he had a person that came in from Bavaria and he did experiments on them, they acted one way, and somebody from Leipzig, which is up near Berlin, if he had somebody from Leipzig, they acted a totally different way. Now, why in the world would that be? Well, it had to do with the society that they were raised in. And Wundt understood this. He knew that people from different parts of Germany acted differently because of the way that they were raised. The people that lived in the mountains acted one way. The people that lived out in the western portion of Germany, which is mostly farmland, acted totally different because they didn't have to worry about the mountains, for one thing. They didn't have to travel through the mountains in order to get there. Their winters weren't nearly as bad as the individuals that lived in Bavaria, in the mountainous regions of Germany. In 1896, Norman Triplett of Indiana University conducted the first social psychology experiment when he set out to prove that competition increased performance, and this is known as social facilitation. Triplett in 1890, he wrote it in 1898. He did the experiment in 1896. He set children winding a thread on a reel, sometimes on their own and sometimes against others. What he found confirmed his theory. The children went faster when in competition with somebody else. So if you have to run a race, and this happened to me one time, I was in, my wife was stationed in Japan, and I was with her in Japan, and I was running 3 miles, and I ran past the flight line, and then I ran back. And I timed myself every day. It was 3 miles. I knew it was 3 miles, a mile and a half out, mile and a half back. One day, as I was running out, this other guy started running with me at lunch. He was a military guy, and he was running at lunch. And he was a little bit ahead of me, and as he was running along, I was running a little bit faster. And then I decided to compete with him. So I ran about the same speed he did, and when we turned around, I passed him. And he sped up, and I sped up, and I tried to stay ahead of him, and I was able to stay ahead of him. And when I got back and I looked at my watch to see how fast I went, I'd gone 2 minutes faster than I had ever gone before. Why? Because I was in competition. Anyway, okay. That was back when I could run 3 miles fairly fast. What did I run? It was something like 20 minutes and 50 seconds for 3 miles, which is not too bad. Not too shabby, under 7 minutes a mile. Okay, I told you I was going to talk about Gordon Allport's brother, and here he is. This is Floyd. In 1924, Floyd Allport published an influential text on social psychology, Society for the Psychological Study of Social Issues, founded in 1936. He was one of the founding members, along with his brother. It was just in time because the years following publication were fraught with world upheaval. This is 1936. And what do we know about 1936? The 1930s, the Depression was still going on. The Nazis had taken over in Germany in 1932. They were starting to expand. The Italians were starting to expand in North Africa. The Japanese were invading Manchuria in China. A lot of stuff was going on. A lot of stuff. The Spanish Civil War was in 1932 in Spain. Of course, where else would the Spanish Civil War be? Anyway, there was a lot going on. So the Great Depression started in 1929, and it was still going on in 1936. Led to a rise of fascism around the world, but became the dominant political idea in Germany with Hitler, in Italy with Mussolini. Mussolini is the one that actually started fascism in the 1920s. And then when Franco won the Civil War in Spain, he was a fascist as well. Just after World War I, German psychologists Kurt Kafka, Max Wertheimer, and Wolfgang Köhler, they were all students of Karl Stumpf. And the only reason I put that in there, the thing about Karl Stumpf, is because I taught his granddaughter at Ashford University when I was there. His granddaughter, I think it was his granddaughter, maybe it was his great granddaughter. She was a tennis player, and she came to the United States to play tennis and get her education. And I wrote her a letter of recommendation for a college in Germany, get her master's degree. Anyway, so Köhler, Kafka, and Wertheimer, they all came together to form the concept of Gestalt psychology. Gestalt emphasizes the mind actively organizes stimuli into meaningful wholes. A lot of times we get little pieces of information, and we're constantly trying to stick them together to make sense of the world. So we take pieces and we try to make a whole, and that's Gestalt. Gestalt sees the social environment not only made up of individuals, but also relations between individuals, relationships that have important psychological implications. So if I'm at this happened to me at Convocation. I have lots of friends at Dene College, just about everybody. I like everybody. but not everybody likes me. And there was this one guy, there's this one guy that always gives me a hard time. And so he was making a presentation, and I asked him a question, and he got really upset that, first of all, that I spoke when he was speaking. He didn't like that. Well, I didn't speak over him. I asked him a question. When he asked for questions, I asked him a question, and he just kind of went off on me, as interesting as that is. So was it the fact, did he not like the question I asked him? It was a pretty softball question. Was that the problem? No. The problem was that he doesn't like me, and he thought that I was probably trying to undercut him. That's not what was going on at all. But it's a relationship. So everybody else in the room were just kind of shocked that this guy was so angry for no reason, and it wasn't a difficult question. It wasn't one that challenged him at all. It was just a question, but it was the fact that I was the one that asked that question, and that's part of Gestalt as well. Gestalt saw groups as social entities that led to the tradition of group processes and group dynamics. All of these things coming together. Now, sometimes people join groups and they don't really understand the totality of the group. They're not exactly, they believe in one little thing and they think that, well, the group must think the way that I do. Then they get into the group and, wow, yeah, that one thing is the same, but everything else is totally different. And that's the way groups work. You can be a member of the Republican Party and like Trump, but you don't like his policies. Wait a minute, does that still make me a Republican? Or you could be a Democrat and you don't like, and you like Biden's economics, but you don't like the infrastructure bill. You know, wait a minute, am I still a Democrat? Okay, so we're talking about group dynamics. Carl was a Navy SEAL. This is Carl right here. After he got out of the Navy, he confronted his sexuality and joined a local gay group in San Diego. Before Carl joined the group, they would just sit around in the bar and complain about how they were treated in the community. After Carl joined the group, the members were more willing to admit their sexuality and they became more socially active. Why? Because Carl gave them the desire to express themselves, because he was a Navy SEAL. Before, they were feeling not very masculine, and now that they had a Navy SEAL amongst them, they felt better about themselves. After World War II, social psychology blossomed as research sought answers to problems of the day. Theodor Adorno and Stanley Milgram had influential research programs searching to explain Nazi atrocities, things the Nazis did during World War II, things that the Japanese did during World War II, just go well beyond anything that anyone could even imagine before the war. Leon Festinger developed the theory of cognitive dissonance, trying to explain how Germans could ignore the obvious, the fact that they were exterminating all these people. You didn't know? How could you not know? It stinks over here. It smells like burning human flesh. Kenneth Clark and Mamie Phipps Clark studied effects of segregation on the self-concept of black children. Ethical concerns spurred discussion and reform in the 1960s and 1970s. Protection and experimental participants from psychological distress became a concern following Milgram's obedience study and Zimbardo's Stanford prison study. And we're going to talk about Milgram's obedience study and Zimbardo's Stanford prison study. They didn't turn out the way they thought they would. They felt that it was pure research. Turned out completely different, because people don't always react the way you think they are. Institutional review boards were developed to meet this need. And of course, if you want to do research at Diné College, then you have to go through the Diné College IRB, headed by Dr. Suzanne Russ, who is supposed to be teaching this class, but we have given her another assignment. The world very much dictates to the social psychologist what it is that they will be studying. In the 1940s, prejudice seemed to grip the world. The Germans were prejudiced against the Jews. The Japanese were prejudiced against the Chinese. They were prejudiced against Europeans because they're Asian. They thought that they were superior to everybody else. It was the main topic of interest to social psychology, was prejudice back in the 1940s. In the 1950s, it was intolerance, especially in the United States, where we were still segregated. The United States was still segregated. Education was segregated. If you were African American, you couldn't go to many of the colleges in the United States. In the 1960s, it was aggression, and that was because of the anti-war movement, and that was because of the civil rights movement. There were riots taking place in the United States. There were riots taking place in France, and in Berlin, and in London, England, and in Canada. Riots every place. Why were people so aggressive? Well, the Vietnam War was going on, but that wasn't just it. It had to do with the fact that the past ideas were now being rejected. And the only way that people felt like they could change them was to be aggressive. And that's what the riots were all concerned about. They were concerned about civil rights. They were concerned about ending the war in Vietnam. In the 1970s, it was feminism. One of the things that came out of the civil rights movement, they came out of the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, was the fact that women weren't being treated the same as the men were. The men and the women were going out and they were rioting or they were demonstrating, and when they came back, the men expected the women to cook supper. Well, they'd both done the same thing. Why in the world does she have to cook the supper? Why couldn't he cook the supper? And that's where feminism came from. And then they realized there's a lot of things about today's society that we don't really like. In the 1980s, it was the arms race. What was going on? The United States could destroy the world 147 times, and the Russians could destroy the world 156 times. We had too many nuclear weapons. And those nuclear weapons, if anybody ever used them, were going to destroy the world. So it was the arms race. It was de-escalating the possibility of nuclear war. In the 1990s, it became diversity. What does that mean? That means that before that, everything, advertising, television, were mostly about white people. And then in the 1990s, people realized, wait a minute, not all the people in the United States are white. We need more diversity. We need to show people who are Hispanic. We need to show people who are African American. We need to show people who are Native American. 1950s, it was intolerance, and of course the civil rights movement started in the 1950s. They had all these segregated schools, especially in the South, but there were some in the North. In the 1960s, it was aggression, and that had to do with anti-war movement. Also had to do with civil rights was continuing. There were riots in the streets around the United States. 1970s, it was feminism. That's where NOW came from, the National Organization of Women. Don't be a clown, take women seriously. My sister was part of this feminist movement in the 1970s. My sister was, wait a minute, let me think. She was born in 44 and I was born in 49. So she was 5 years older than I was. 1980s was the arms race. Nuclear bombs mean certain death to all. The idea was that if a war ever started, if a nuclear war ever started, we'd all be dead. 1990s, it was diversity. I've got the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, of course, and they were very diverse. I'm not sure which one of these people. She's Japanese, he's African American. I don't know, she's probably Hispanic. Hard to say, hard to say. Anyway, and 2000s terrorism, maybe. This is the World Trade Center getting attacked. You can see the plane coming in. Terrorism. Okay, so we're talking about Gestalt, and all this has to do with perception. As you can see, this is an optical illusion. These are men working on the walls. course, it turns into a waterfall. Wait a minute. Is it a waterfall or is it people? And we have the same thing here. Is this an audience or are these houses? Optical illusion. Here's one where you have to count horses. Horses. And there's 5. If you can count 5 horses, just look at the legs, it's kind of tough. But if you look at noses, there's a nose, here's a nose, here's a nose, here's a nose, and there's the last one. I think I got them all. Okay, I think I did, yeah. And it's another optical illusion because everything mixes together. And this one. Is she in the puzzle or is she standing there? Though most scientists would like to deny it, it is nearly impossible for them to put their cultural values aside and view another culture or their own with an open mind. These commonly held values are known as social representations. That's okay. That's the reason I told you that I'm from Indiana, that I grew up on a farm, that I've been through I've had all of these experiences in other places. That's my social representation. I can't get away from it. It's who I am. 12 years in the Air Force. That's who I am. I've done things that you would never do. First of all, I worked in a morgue, and you guys would never work in a morgue. I've done autopsies. You guys would never do an autopsy. It's taboo, and I understand that. That's fine. Somebody's got to do it, but we're not going to assign that to the Navajo in the group. We'll assign that to somebody else. I know. Let's let Bradway do it. He doesn't mind. Two movements that have forced social scientists to acknowledge their social representations have been the feminist movement and the Marxist movement. Feminism has forced social scientists to question their Eurocentric idea of male domination. And that's what happened when the Europeans first came over to the Americas. They were always looking for a male leader because they were male-centric. They only wanted to talk to males. They didn't want to talk to females. Because in Europe, females couldn't even own land. And here, a female as a leader, that's one of the reasons why they talk about Amazons as if, it's this mythic beast. How could a woman be a warrior? How could a woman be a leader? That's the whole story of Amazons goes way back to the Greeks. And that is because Europeans are male-centric. They were male-dominated. The religions of Europe are male-dominated. The Muslim religion, certainly the Christian religion, the Orthodox religion, which comes out of Christianity, which is a form of Christianity. Yeah, they're all male-dominated. I can't think of a religion that isn't male-dominated. Maybe the Hindus. Anyway, Marxism has forced them to question the idea of deference to the rich and the powerful. And of course, the reaction, the reaction of certain people in the United States, the more conservative people in the United States, they were really happy to get that tax break for the wealthy. Why in the world? If you don't have that much money, why in the world would you be happy that those people were getting a tax break? Does it mean that your taxes are going to go down? No, it means that your taxes are going to go up. So why are you so happy about it? Why would you vote for somebody who would lower the taxes for the wealth, the rich and the powerful? And that has to do with Marxism. It's one of the reasons why the conservative people talk negatively about Marxist. Okay, I'm going to show you some pictures. Well, this is one of the pictures I'm showing you that you're not going to like. Social scientists in general and psychologists in particular are required to constantly decide what is right and what is normal. These are all value judgments. Is somebody mature or are they immature? Are they well adjusted or are they poorly adjusted? Are they mentally healthy or mentally ill? These are people of Irian Jaya. It's part of Indonesia. Is this okay? Is this normal? Is this old man standing here with an axe on his shoulder? Is it okay? He doesn't have any clothes on. But you can't see his penis because he's got a penis sheath on. These guys do too. Oh, here it is. Where is Irian Jaya? Oh, there it is. Irian Jaya. This is what I was talking about. Half of New Guinea is Irian Jaya, the western half. There's Australia. Irian Jaya. Is this okay? Is this normal? This is David. And strangely enough, this is a sculpture by Michelangelo. There was just a huge uproar in Florida, and they're still arguing about it. A teacher, I can't remember, she was a 5th or 6th grade teacher, was teaching Michelangelo, she was teaching about art, and she showed this picture. And the parents just went berserk because you can see the man's penis and his testicles. But of course, this is justice, and that's why she's got her arms upraised. But she didn't have a shirt on. Here's a lady this is a sculpture in Washington, D.C. Is that pornographic? Is this pornographic? Is this pornographic? Is that pornographic? In other words, is it offensive? These women aren't wearing any tops. Neither are these men. This is a child. There's another child. 1992, Andrew Martinez began going to class au natural at the University of California, Berkeley. This is Andrew Martinez right there. That is all he wore. He just wore a modesty scarf. At first, he was treated as a novelty and at the liberal institution. And Berkeley is one of the more liberal institutions in the United States. This is 1992. But was eventually arrested and expelled for breaking the school ethics code because nobody wanted to sit in a chair that Andrew Martinez had been sitting in. He was known as the naked guy at Berkeley, and he walked around town without clothes on. There he is again. Martinez. What do we, donations for the revolution. That's what this jar says. So he has a revolution going on. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture of more naked people, so don't get excited. It's not just Martinez. These are the naked guy with his explicit players. These were other individuals that were willing to be naked. Okay. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about norms and rights. Is this correct? Well, this is probably not correct. It wouldn't be correct for somebody on the Navajo Nation to run around with a penis sheath. Wouldn't be natural. It wouldn't be acceptable for Mr. Martinez to live on the Navajo reservation and only wear a scarf from time to time. Mostly he didn't. Or for these people to sing a song. They were a singing group. So for your culture, this is totally unacceptable. However, we're not talking about the Navajo Nation. We're talking about Berkeley, California. Was it okay there? Well, it wasn't, because he eventually got arrested and expelled. So it wasn't acceptable there either. How about this? These are the Kurubo of the Amazon River, Amazon rainforest. You don't want to get hit by one of those clubs. Those are solid. It will split your head wide open. Here's a hunting party. And there's the women and children back home. Nobody's got any clothes on. Is that acceptable? Oh, that's part of their culture. How about that? I think that's on the cover of an album. Wrecking Ball. That's Miley Cyrus. Is that acceptable? Ooh, value judgments. This is tough. Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay. Probably, well, I don't know. It's not up to me to make a decision. I'm sure you all saw this. If you listen to music, modern music, well, it's not that modern. When did she do this? In the early 2000s? One reason why any psychological theory should be approached with a degree of skepticism is because the theory was developed utilizing a select scientist's value judgments. So we all have value judgments. My value judgments are from Indiana. They're from the military. They're from people in Texas. I lived in Texas, Mississippi, Ohio, Maryland, California several times, Nebraska. Raised my kids in Nebraska, Montana. I lived up there for 10 years. Where else have I been? Ohio. Did I say Ohio? Anyway, I've been all over the place. Germany, Japan. So that's who I am. There's nothing I can do about that. I can't make my brain Navajo. I just can't do it. It's not going to happen. And even if I wanted it to happen, which I don't. I like who I am. If I wanted to be Navajo, I couldn't do it. I can't take my past away from myself. Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs is a perfect example. Maslow's heroes that he used to define as self-actualized individuals were all Jewish intellectuals who had escaped from Nazi Germany. So when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we talk about self-actualization, he developed that pyramid from talking to and dealing with Jewish intellectuals who had escaped from Nazi Germany. Nationalism versus patriotism. Muwafiq is from Afghanistan and wants to prevent the United States from destroying his country. He considers himself a patriot. He's patriotic. Kyle is from Pittsburgh and not only backs the United States invasion as patriotic, but he sees Muwafiq's position as blindly nationalistic. Kyle sees the invasion of Afghanistan as a patriotic endeavor to keep terrorists out of the United States. And of course, now we have pulled out of Afghanistan, so I'm not sure how Kyle feels about it. He's probably pissed off that we didn't do a better job getting people out. And the Taliban have taken over. And now maybe Muwafiq is pissed off that the fundamental Muslimism has taken over in Afghanistan again. Now he's mad again. Open-ended marriage versus adultery. When Jocko married Simone, he told her from the start that he was not sure if he could stick with the monogamy thing. 3 years into the marriage, he came home early to find his wife having an affair with his bald next-door neighbor. He accused her of adultery and defended his own indiscretions as an agreed-upon open-ended marriage. It was okay for him to have an open-ended marriage, but not his wife. Here's the bald-headed neighbor, by the way. I just noticed that there's a bald-headed person behind her. Ambitious versus aggressive. Marlene and Marlon were after the same promotion at work. Both put in extra hours and put in a great deal of overtime. While both demanded a great deal from their workers, Marlene was branded as aggressive, while Marlon was seen as ambitious. No one wanted to work for an aggressive female, but they didn't mind working for an ambitious male. So what the hell's the difference? Value judgments. Timid versus cautious. Daryl and Daryl went to the same school and were in the same grade. Both were seen as shy when they were young. When they entered high school, Daryl was teased mercilessly as being cautious. This is Daryl, that's the male. While Daryl was seen as demure and ladylike for her timidity. So both of them acted the same, But because the male was acting timidly, he was seen as being cautious. But the female, when she acted exactly the same way, she was seen as demure and ladylike. It was attractive in her, but not in him. Value judgments. Once again, it's a value judgment. Perversions are sex acts that we do not practice. So anything that we don't do is perverse. That's what sexual perversions are. For a period of time, the Clinton-Lewinsky affair rocked the foundations of the United States government. Portions of the populace were appalled by perversions the two participated in. The myriad of jokes show their idea of normal, and probably you guys haven't heard most of these jokes or heard of what was going on. It's long gone. They had a investigation, an in-depth investigation of what was going on, and this came out as the Starr Report. And of course, there was a lot of what went on between the two of them. She was 21 years old. He was in his 30s, late 30s, I think, maybe 40. Maybe he was 40, but she was only 21. She was his intern or an intern at the White House, and she was having an affair with him. But they never had genital sex, if I understand correctly. And of course, he was the president, so and that was all in the Starr Report. So it was some pretty risque reading, I guess. Social science many times will get caught between what is and what the scientists believe ought to be. This is known as naturalistic fallacy. When the missionaries first arrived in Hawaii, they found the rampant lack of clothes bad and the hula lascivious. They clothed the islanders and remade the hula in their own frumpish manner, and now, of course, you can wear something on your ankles, but other than that, you don't want to show anything off. In the beginning, of course, the Hawaiians, I don't know if you've ever been to Hawaii, but it's paradise. It's 80 degrees all the time. I guess Maui just got hit by a flash fire, and it's killed 80 people. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about, is it? We're talking about the Hawaiian Islands. Yeah, so the people didn't wear clothes. They didn't need them. It's warm enough that they didn't need clothes. They ran around without any clothes. And when the missionaries first got there, they were so appalled that they put them in clothes. And of course, they were doing the hula, which is there's a lot of different ways that you can do the hula, but one of them has to do with reproductive enticement. They were trying to entice people to have, it was for reproductive purposes. That was only a little part of the hula. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on. But of course, they found their nudity objectionable. So this is how they started out, and this is how they ended up. So is this correct or is this correct? Is this bad? Is this good, or is this good, bad, and this good? Well, if you're a Muslim, then you cover yourself up. If you're a female, you don't want anybody to see anything. If you're in the United States, of course, dressing like this is objectionable, but dressing like this isn't. The self is shaped by the shapes and the social environment. It is shaped by and it shapes the social environment. The self is our social being that has the ability to use symbols to communicate with itself through self-awareness. Self-awareness and symbol usage may have evolved as a means to deal with an increasingly complex social environment. Self-awareness allows people to reflect on their own actions as a means to understand what others might do. Communication allows people to coordinate activities. The self-serving bias, the tendency to take credit for success but deny responsibility for failure, affects our self-concepts and therefore affects the way that we respond to social events. We use it to protect our sense of self-worth, and that is why we do it. We need to protect our feelings of self. Quarles probably drinks a little more than he should, and when he does, he becomes obnoxious and verbally abusive. Quarles has been married and divorced twice. from women who everyone else saw as lovely and caring, but whom he refers to as harridans, which is a word that means a strict, bossy, or belligerent older woman. Quarles' description of his exes is a case of self-serving bias, and that's why he drinks. He's using that as an excuse to drink, despite these lovely ladies that he was married to. And of course, if you've ever listened to Margaritaville, I'm not going to play it because if I do, I can't put this on the internet for you guys to watch. So it's copyrighted. So you can listen to Margaritaville, and that is the gist of the song Margaritaville. He starts out by saying, who is to blame? This woman is to blame in the beginning. Then he says, oh, maybe it wasn't her fault. And then in the end, he says it was his own damn fault. So finally, he decides that the breakup was his fault. And that's why he's drinking margaritas in Margaritaville. The Danish philosopher and theologian Soren Kierkegaard once said, life is lived forwards, but it's understood backwards. This is one of the reasons why when people are given information, they tend to think that it was knowable all along. And this they think of as common sense. This is also known as the I knew it all along phenomenon, or hindsight bias. The United States dominant culture emphasizes uniqueness and individuality. The United States is an individualistic country, and it should be because it's so diverse. If we go other places, if we go to Japan, Japan's 95% Japanese. It's easy for them to think of themselves as homogenous because they really are. I mean, the vast majority of everybody you run into is Japanese. But in the United States, you never know who you're going to run into. More of the millennial generation says that they are unique than the previous generations. Also, they're also more tolerant of others' differences than previous generations. And this is one of the beauties of the United States. All those prejudiced people, all those intolerant people, they're all dying out. They have different ideas. And this is one of the reasons why if you talk to your elders, they probably have very different ideas than you do. Individualism takes care of their self, their immediate family only. They pursue their own goals. They don't like being influenced by a group. Collectivism, on the other hand, they take care of others within their group. The group goals are more important than the individual goals. They accept group influence. About 70% of the world's population lives in societies with strong collectivist philosophies. In the Navajo Nation, the Navajo people, part of the traditionalism is collectivism. The goal of evolutionary psychology is to look for explanations for behavioral universals. This discipline seeks how these behaviors might have enhanced odds of reproductive success. Remember that individuals don't evolve. Populations evolve over many generations. A trait that may have been adaptive at one point may persist and become maladaptive as the environment changes. And this is kind of what happened to the people on Hawaii. The people that are from Hawaii, that are native-born Hawaiians, that come from the island ancestry. Those individuals, a lot of people have gone to Hawaii. I've been there. I didn't reproduce while I was there, but I didn't reproduce while I was there. Let me say that. Okay, so Europeans that are there, they're not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the Filipinos. I'm not talking about the Japanese on the Hawaiian Islands or the Portuguese. I'm talking about the people that were there prior to that. Islands could only sustain so many people. There was only so much food. They could only sustain so many people. So what happened with their reproduction? Hawaiians don't reproduce very rapidly. And the reason is because that was the control. The control was it was difficult to reproduce. How about that? Okay. So when you talk about, your great-grandmother had 13 kids or she had 17 kids. That's never going to happen on Hawaii. Women aren't going to have multiple children, lots and lots of children. They might have 2, they might have 3, but that was it. That's all they could tolerate. That's all that, if they had 17 kids, then the next lady couldn't have any. Well, the next group of women couldn't have any because they could only sustain so many people. This is part of evolutionary psychology. Sex is the biological state of being male or female. That's your plumbing. So you're either born with a penis or a vagina. If you are born with a penis, you're a male. If you are born with a vagina, you are female. And that is your sex. Your gender is psychological state of being masculine or feminine, your way of relating to the world. So sex has to do with the biology. Gender has to do with the emotional structure of who you are. So you may be born, biologically you may be a male, but gender-wise you may feel like a female. And that's the way it works. Now we understand that. 30 years ago that was unheard of. If you're born a boy, then you were a boy all your life, and there's nothing you could do. And if you were gay, then that meant that there was something wrong with you. And they tried to change it. Not anymore. Now we understand that you can be born one thing and you can be psychologically something totally different. Social neuroscience examines relationships between social and neural processes. Social neuroscience helps us understand which cognitive processes are involved in specific behavior. This discipline has developed to study relationships between neural processes and social processes. The development of functional MRIs and PET scans have helped spur collaboration between neuroscience and social psychology. These new imaging techniques measure level of metabolism in regions and individual cells in the brain. Evolutionary psychology looks to explain social behaviors that appear to be cultural universals. Topics studied by evolutionary psychologists include aggression. Why are some societies more aggressive than others? Helping. Why do some societies help in a social situation and others don't? Interpersonal attraction. Why are people attracted to the people that they're attracted to? Love. Is it universal? Is it a universal imperative? Stereotyping. When we stereotype people, does everybody do that? Caution has been raised about how to apply evolutionary principles to contemporary behaviors. This is a tough one because with cell phones and with computers, people around the world can interact and intercommunicate. Is that going to change cultures? Is that going to break down the barriers that cultures have always set up? Positive psychology is an emerging perspective in social psychology. Positive psychologists attempt to focus on positive aspects of human functioning to increase well-being. Positive psychology's main emphasis is to teach people to avoid harmful self-deceptions while still maintaining a sense of realistic optimism about life. Morality is one of the areas focused on by positive psychologists. These psychologists focus on standards of right and wrong to understand how moral judgments help or hinder social relations. I am a positive psychologist. Professor/Dr. Barber is a positive psychologist, as is Suzanne Russ, Dr. Russ. Marilyn Begay has only been with us for a couple of years, and I'm not exactly sure. She's a counselor, so she deals with pathology in her daily undertaking, but I would imagine that she still pushes the positive psychology as well. And that's the end of the lecture, finally. So there you go. If you have any questions about anything, if I said anything, if you're offended by some of the pictures that I showed you, I apologize. But when we're talking about value judgments, is this right or is this wrong? Is this something, if we see Hawaiians, if we land on the Hawaiian Islands and they're all naked and that offends us because we wear gloves as well as cover up all of our skin. Is that right or wrong? That's why I showed that to you. It was kind of for the shock factor, actually, so that I want you to think, not everybody's like me. Maybe I'm right for where I am, but maybe they're right for where they are. I'm trying to make you think. What's wrong with me? Okay, so I'll talk to you guys next week. That is week 1's lecture.